The next patch for Baldur's Gate 3 comes out sometime early this year, and with it we'll be getting one new subclass per class added to the game. This delivers 12 new spicy subclasses that can drastically mix up the current formula of how we approach our character builds in one of the best games made in the last 10 years. I'm beyond excited for this patch, and today I want to go over all 12 of those subclasses and what their rules are like from D&D 5th edition to give you a sense of what this might look like coming into Baldur's Gate 3. In my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge in my videos, let me just tell you that all of this is speculative. I'm going to go pretty low tech here and bring up a web page per each subclass to talk about their abilities, projected ability growth across how many levels we've got, all 12 levels, and what they might look like across fun multi-class options. I just don't want to waste your time in case you thought there was going to be concrete details here that are actually from the game. I know there's a stress test of the patch going on, but I was not lucky enough to make it in. So again, everything here is speculative. But if that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video down and get back to enjoying your many playthroughs of Baldur's Gate 3. Before you head out, if you find the video or the information in this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, as each one of those things helps me out in a huge way. Also, don't forget to check me out on Twitch, where I'll be streaming the patch as well as plenty of other games. But let's get started on the ultimate breakdown of the new subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3. So to start us off, we'll talk about the Bard. I'll just go through this alphabetically as we were given the information from Larian. So the College of Glamour is the new college being added in for the Bard. I'll read this little lore blurb here. The College of Glamour is the home of bards who mastered their craft in the vibrant realm of the Feywild or under the tutelage of someone who dwelled there. Tutored by satyrs, eladrin, and other Fey, these bards learn to use their magic to delight and captivate others. And we already know what we're getting as far as at least a taste. They did talk about in the patch notes some of the abilities that are coming to each subclass. So we'll talk about those abilities and how they illustrate them, as well as some of the other ones or maybe ones that they've left out, because we don't know if that's an entire encompassing breakdown of every single one. So the first thing here is Mantle of Inspiration, and I'm going to show you this. This is the actual GIF of it from the patch notes, and we can see the character casting Mantle of Inspiration, and we know that it gives 5 temporary hit points. That is true from 5th edition as well as from the information on the patch notes. Cast Mantle of Inspiration to bestow your allies with 5 temp hit points, and should an enemy attack while it is cast, they themselves are charmed. So what's interesting here is Mantle of Inspiration and Enthralling Performance seem to be combined together for the constraints of Baldur's Gate 3, because Enthralling Performance has that same effect. Well, something kind of similar to it. I'm sorry, not Enthralling Performance, Unbreakable Majesty. So for the duration, whenever any creature that tries to attack you for the first time on a turn, the attacker must take a charisma saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, it can't attack you on this turn and must choose a new target for this attack. So it seems like kind of an interesting combination between these two. It's kind of funky how they've done this. So Mantle of Inspiration here, you're going to use a bonus action to expend a Bardic Inspiration to grant yourself a wondrous appearance. And each of the targets within the range that you choose, blah, blah, blah. There's more to this as far as like your charisma modifier and the number of equals to it. Like, oh, you can only target this many people equal to your charisma modifier. I don't know if they would do that in the game. Each of them gains 5 temp hit points. When a creature gains these temp hit points, it can immediately use its reaction to move up to its speed without provoking opportunity attacks. It did not mention that in the patch notes, but I would love this to be added in because it's a really cool way to give mobility to your heroes. What? To your heroes? To your party? To your party without having to expend certain talents or what have you. I think, and this is a really cool capability, to allow them to use a reaction when a lot of characters don't have good uses of their reactions. Think about it, right? Like, wizards most of the time don't usually have good uses for their reactions unless it's the shield spell, or same thing with sorcerers. You take a look at characters like fighters or monks who can weaponize their reaction. That kind of changes things up. But this is, I think, a really cool way to add a little bit of support spice into the Bard in a different format than just simply healing or buffing. And I think this is a really cool version of that. I think one of the unfortunate lackluster things here is 5 temp hit points. Temp hit points in general are not an awesome mechanic. They're great in the very beginning of the game, but it falls off very quickly towards the mid and later points of the game because A, you can have only one source of temp hit points, period. So if you have 5 temp hit points from Mantle of Inspiration and you use another ability, the other ability will probably overwrite it. Whatever has the highest amount of temp hit points max is the one that will take superiority or precedence. So if I were to use a hypothetical potion that would give me 6 temp hit points, it would overwrite Mantle of Inspiration. So that, just to give you an example. Now, enthralling performance is an interesting thing. It doesn't mention this at all in the patch notes, but basically it charms targets that can hear your performance. But what I think would be cool is if they actually added this into the game for the College of Glamour Bard, much in the same way that we see the Harpies have their capability, right? They use their Harpy song and it charms you. I would love to have something like this where using the perform action, actually sitting there and doing using your instrument to create music in the middle of a fight would be really cool to basically say, okay, as my character, I've done my primary action. I'm going to do my bonus action to start an enthralling performance. And for the entire rest of my turn, I'm doing a performance which will do an AoE charm in, let's just say, 30 feet. And if anyone comes in that range, they have to do a charisma check to see, or I'm sorry, a wisdom save to see if they get charmed or not. And if they get charmed, then bam, I lock them down basically. But this all comes around then to Mantle of Majesty, which we know is in the game. So basically, as a bonus action, you cast Command without expending a spell slot, and you take an appearance of unearthly beauty for 1 minute until your concentration ends. During this time, you can cast Command as a bonus action on each of your turns. It does not seem to be this way in Baldur's Gate 3. The way that it says in the patch note, play your hand correctly and you'll be able to use this to your advantage with Mantle of Majesty. Target charmed enemies and you can command them to flee, move closer, freeze, drop to the ground, or drop their weapon. So it seems to be that you get using command on charmed enemies gets you to do certain things with them. Just like it says right here, any creature charmed by you automatically fails its saving throw against the command you cast with this feature. So it'll be interesting to see how Mantle of Majesty are played into each other. Unbreakable Majesty, like I said, seems to be just kind of slotted into the way Mantle of Inspiration works, but I think Enthralling Performance will be really fun here to give us some fun action. And this could be really fun used in conjunction with a Fey Warlock to just kind of overwhelm Archfey Warlock to really have a lot of fun with this Fey direction, with that charisma, because remember, if you're a Warlock, you're jumping into that. Could be also fun too with the Sorcerer as well, to give you some additional lockdown mechanics from the Bard side of this, and then being able to spice into some actual DPS portion with the Sorcerer. What's interesting though is we don't really know how these levels are going to break out, right? Are we going to get Mantle of Inspiration at level 1? And Mantle of Majesty at level 6, what's the actual breakout of the levels? And those progression points are going to really dictate how these subclasses are going to feel. We should probably expect stuff to happen at 1, 3, 6, or 7, depending on the class, and maybe something at 10 or 11. That's typical. That's the typical progression that we see with the majority of our subclasses. Depends upon like if it's a melee or a casting class. Casting classes tend to have stuff that happen at 7 versus melees tend to have stuff at 6. And we'll just have to see how this all shakes out, because that's going to dictate how these subclasses are going to help all the multi-classes for the future. So to start us off, we'll talk about the Bard. I'll just go through this alphabetically as we were given the information from Larian. So the College of Glamour is the new college being added in for the Bard. I'll read this little lore blurb here. The College of Glamour is the home of bards who mastered their craft in the vibrant realm of the Feywild or under the tutelage of someone who dwelled there. Tutored by satyrs, eladrin, and other Fey, these bards learn to use their magic to delight and captivate others. And we already know what we're getting as far as at least a taste. They did talk about in the patch notes some of the abilities that are coming to each subclass. So we'll talk about those abilities and how they illustrate them, as well as some of the other ones or maybe ones that they've left out. Because we don't know if that's an entire encompassing breakdown of every single one. So the first thing here is Mantle of Inspiration. And I'm going to show you this. This is the actual GIF of it from the patch notes. And we can see the character casting Mantle of Inspiration. And we know that it gives 5 temporary hit points. That is true from 5th edition, as well as from the information on the patch notes. Cast Mantle of Inspiration to bestow your allies with 5 temp hit points, and should an enemy attack while it is cast, they themselves are charmed. So what's interesting here is Mantle of Inspiration and Enthralling Performance seem to be combined together for the constraints of Baldur's Gate 3, because Enthralling Performance has that same effect. Well, something kind of similar to it. I'm sorry, not Enthralling Performance, Unbreakable Majesty. So for the duration, whenever any creature that tries to attack you for the first time on a turn, the attacker must take a Charisma saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, it can't attack you on this turn and must choose a new target for this attack. So it seems like kind of an interesting combination between these two. It's kind of funky how they've done this. So Mantle of Inspiration here, you're going to use a bonus action to expend a Bardic Inspiration to grant yourself a Wondrous Appearance. And each of the targets within the range that you choose, blah, blah, blah. There's more to this as far as like your charisma modifier and the number of equals to it. Like, oh, you can only target this many people equal to your charisma modifier. I don't know if they would do that in the game. Each of them gains 5 temp hit points. When a creature gains these temp hit points, it can immediately use its reaction to move up to its speed without provoking opportunity attacks. It did not mention that in the patch notes, but I would love this to be added in because it's a really cool way to give mobility to your heroes. What? To your heroes, to your party, to your party without having to expend certain talents or what have you. I think, and this is a really cool capability, you know, to allow them to use a reaction when a lot of characters don't have good uses of their reactions. Think about it, right? Like, wizards most of the time don't usually have good uses for their reactions unless it's the shield spell, or same thing with sorcerers. You take a look at characters like fighters or monks who can weaponize their reaction. That kind of changes things up. But this is, I think, a really cool way to add a little bit of support spice into the bard in a different format than just simply healing or buffing. And I think this is a really cool version of that. I think one of the unfortunate lackluster things here is 5 temp hit points. Temp hit points in general are not an awesome mechanic. They're great in the very beginning of the game, but it falls off very quickly towards the mid and later points of the game because you can have only one source of temp hit points, period. So if you have 5 temp hit points from Mantle of Inspiration and you use another ability, the other ability will probably override it. Whatever has the highest amount of temp hit points max is the one that will take superiority or precedence. So if I were to use a hypothetical potion that would give me 6 temp hit points, it would overwrite Mantle of Inspiration. So that, just to give you an example. Now, Enthralling Performance is an interesting thing. It doesn't mention this at all in the patch notes, but basically it charms targets that can hear your performance. But what I think would be cool is if they actually added this into the game for the College of Glamour Bard, much in the same way that we see the Harpies have their capability, right? They use their Harpy song and it charms you. I would love to have something like this where using the perform action, actually sitting there and doing or using your instrument to create music in the middle of a fight would be really cool to basically say, okay, as my character, I've done my primary action. I'm going to do my bonus action to start an enthralling performance. And for the entire rest of my turn, I'm doing a performance which will do an AoE charm in, let's just say, 30 feet. And if anyone comes in that range, they have to do a charisma check to see, or I'm sorry, a wisdom save to see if they get charmed or not. And if they get charmed, then bam, I lock them down basically. But this all comes around then to Mantle of Majesty, which we know is in the game. So basically, as a bonus action, you cast Command without expending a spell slot, and you take an appearance of unearthly beauty for 1 minute until your concentration ends. During this time, you can cast Command as a bonus action on each of your turns. It does not seem to be this way in Baldur's Gate 3. The way that it says in the patch note, play your hand correctly and you'll be able to use this to your advantage with Mantle of Majesty. Target charmed enemies and you can command them to flee, move closer, freeze, drop to the ground, or drop their weapon. So it seems to be that you get using command on charmed enemies gets you to do certain things with them. Just like it says right here, any creature charmed by you automatically fails its saving throw against the command you cast with this feature. So it'll be interesting to see how Mantle of Majesty are played into each other. Unbreakable Majesty, like I said, seems to be just kind of slotted into the way Mantle of Inspiration works, but I think Enthralling Performance will be really fun here to give us some fun action. And this could be really fun used in conjunction with a Fey Warlock to just kind of overwhelm Archfey Warlock to really have a lot of fun with this Fey direction, with that charisma, because remember, if you're a Warlock, you're jumping into that. Could be also fun too with the Sorcerer as well, to give you some additional lockdown mechanics from the Bard side of this, and then being able to spice into some actual DPS portion with the Sorcerer. What's interesting though is we don't really know how these levels are going to break out, right? Are we going to get Mantle of Inspiration at level 1? And Mantle of Majesty at level 6, what's the actual breakout of the levels? And those progression points are going to really dictate how these subclasses are going to feel. We should probably expect stuff to happen at 1, 3, 6, or 7, depending on the class, and maybe something at 10 or 11. That's typical. That's the typical progression that we see with the majority of our subclasses. Depends upon like if it's a melee or a casting class. Casting classes tend to have stuff that happen at 7 versus melees tend to have stuff at 6. And we'll just have to see how this all shakes out, because that's going to dictate how these subclasses are going to help all the multi-classes for the future. The other B on the list is the Barbarian. So let's talk the Path of the Giant. Now, the information for the patch notes say opt for the Path of Giants, and your newfound giant strength will make it easier for you to yeet friend and foe alike. Forget chugging potions to pump those muscles. These barbarians benefit from the Giant's Rage passive that grants both strength and size, allowing you to deal additional damage with throw attacks. Pockets weighing you down, not for you and your increased carry capacity. So taking a look at this, it's a pretty interesting subclass for the Barbarian. And I think it could be used in a lot of really fun ways with some sort of melee centered, what's it called? The elemental focused Cleric, which of course is a wisdom class, but there is Giant's Power where you do get a cantrip from Druidcraft or Thaumaturgy, which uses your wisdom as the ability for the spell. I don't think they would add this in. I think this is something from the tabletop. So we can pretty much by and large ignore Giant's Power. But Giant's Havoc is interesting here. This is the unique rage, more or less, for the Path of the Giants. The game calls it Giant's Rage instead, but it gives us Crushing Throw when you attack. Crushing Throw when you make a successful ranged attack with a thrown weapon using Strength, you can add your Rage damage bonus to the attack's damage roll. And Giant Stature, your reach increases by 5 feet, and if you're smaller than large, you become large, along with anything you are wearing. If there isn't enough room for you to increase your size doesn't change. So this allows you to get larger in size. And I think what's cool about that too is you can then use that to throw larger things, and then play around with that a little bit more. And I wonder if this is a cascading thing, like, okay, large can go to gargantuan, I think is the size after large, or giant. It's like small, large, huge. I don't know. There's a progression of size in Dungeons and Dragons. And for those that know it better than me, by all means, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. But this will play into another feature in a second, so we'll come back to that. But Elemental Cleaver is a really interesting one here. And what I like about this is, if we're trying to make a throw barbarian, the typical thing is to use things that come back to you, right? But this could be really cool as a way to combine some elements of gameplay that we're already using in innate class capabilities. So let's take a look at this. So Elemental Cleaver, when you enter your rage, you can choose one weapon that you're holding and infuse it with one of the following damage types: acid, cold, fire, thunder, or lightning. While you wield the infused weapon, it does 1d6 extra damage of the chosen type, and it gains the thrown property. Remember, thrown property is important because thrown property is what does the actual damage with throw weapons. If you throw an axe or a halberd or a two-handed weapon, whatever that doesn't have the thrown property, it does nowhere near as much damage. But if you throw the weapon, it reappears in your hand. So we get a lot of the capabilities that we would otherwise use from other classes to create this, right? If we're doing a throw barbarian, sometimes you're going to use the fighter's capability, right, to imbue a weapon to make it so it's going to come back to your hand with the Eldritch Knight, or you're going to use specifically weapons that do come back to you, like the returning pike, stuff like that. And then this is pretty fun too, because it allows you to basically pull the same effect that we're using from the draconic weapon from Act 2 that it escapes my brain right now. It's the glaive that you use the ability to imbue a weapon with these characteristics. So if this is baked into the barbarian through Elemental Cleaver with the Path of Giants, it makes the throwing barb even more fun to play, because then you can even use a bonus action to change the infused weapon's current damage type. I think this is going to be sick. It's going to make throwing barb way more interesting because it's going to open up some different multi-class options. Because I could see this happening at level 6, enabling you to then go 6 levels into a different direction to change how things work. So I'd really like to see how this plays out. Then we also have Mighty Impel. In tabletop, it's the 10th level. And what it allows you to do as a bonus action while raging, you can choose one medium or smaller creature within your reach and move it to an unoccupied space you can see within 30 feet of yourself. That's a pretty huge distance. An unwilling creature must make a strength save. So what's cool here is this allows you to lean heavy into throw barb, right? You can use Tavern Brawler. You can go really crazy with this because it's going to significantly increase your damage. It's going to give you a baked-in capability to have throw weapons reappear in your hand and imbue those weapons with an elemental type. But furthermore, you can throw your allies. You can launch an ally who's close to you over to someone else. So if you're playing your throw barb, you run up to one of your other characters, because remember, Path of Giants is already going to increase your size. So medium or smaller, that's it. It's small, medium, large. Not to be confused with like ordering something at like a fast food spot. Then I think gargantuan, huge, haha, huge is the other one. So good. I'm so good at all these fucking videos I do, right? Jesus. But either way, you can use your capabilities as a giant barbarian to throw your smaller friends after you've enraged and you've imbued yourself with all sorts of fun stuff. So I think this is going to be a really, really, really cool change to the way the throw barb is done, in a way that makes the throw barb feel more dynamic rather than just a very like right now, throw barb is a very singular cookie cut pattern to approach the barbarian. This bakes in so many things to unlock a lot of different diversity with a throw barb, and a lot of different fun multi-class capabilities. For those of us wanting to play some necromancy, we have the Cleric Death domain, which is going to be real fun. And I think it's also one of the more requested domains for the Cleric. Of course, there's plenty of them to go through. But in this domain, we're going to be tapping heavily into necromancy. And you can see an example of what some of these spells that are going to be accessible through this domain: False Life, Ray of Sickness, Blindness, Ray of Enfeeblement, Animate Dead, Vampiric Touch, Blight, Death Ward. I want to say Death Ward's already accessible for the Cleric. I can't remember, but it's a domain spell, so it's a little bit different, right? And then Cloud Kill. Anti-Life Shell is not in Baldur's Gate 3, so we don't need to worry about it. What does this really look like? So from the actual BG3 patch notes, this is of course specializing necrotic damage. We're going to get access to 3 new necromancy cantrips. This includes Toll the Dead, a cantrip that causes 1 to 8 damage when your cleric rings the bell of impending doom, a number that scales if your target has already been damaged. We've also added the homebrewed ability to explode nearby corpses, damaging enemies. So that's going to be real fun. Let's take a look though at these capabilities here. So Reaper, you learn 1 necromancy cantrip of your choice from any spell list. Just to show you what Toll the Dead actually does, it does 1d8. If the target is missing any of its hit points, it instead takes 1d12 necrotic damage. So this could be a really cool, really fun, easy necromancy cantrip to take for the cleric that just gives us some pretty good necrotic damage. And necrotic damage is very fun in Baldur's Gate 3. There's a lot of really cool ways to augment this. This is a really cool domain. I think you're going to have a lot of fun spicing in with maybe a fighter, maybe a wizard, or I'm not a wizard. What's the thing called that uses wisdom? A druid. Haha. A druid alongside this to maybe go with a spore druid to have a ton of necrotic damage layering. You could even go with a monk, because a monk, an open hand monk, can have their damage be necrotic as well. So you have a lot of ways to really play along with this and just go crazy with the damage types. Here is what Toll the Dead looks like in the game. At least I believe it is. So you can see that guy going off right there. Maybe that's not Toll the Dead, but the GIF from the patch notes makes it look like it is. So from there, though, there's some other things that we can do. There's this here that says when you cast a necromancy cantrip that normally targets only 1 creature, the spell can instead target 2 creatures within range and within 5 feet of each other. I don't know if they're going to be putting this into the game, but I would love if they did, to make it more of a ranged blaster style of necrotic damage versus just like, cool, yeah, you're going to have access to necromancy cantrips and you'll be able to blow corpses up. So I want to hope that this is actually there with Reaper. But Channel Divinity is really cool too with Touch of Death. When you hit a creature with a melee attack, which is important here, this is why I was talking about leaning into the melee side of this as some sort of like cool vampiric type of character that you could play a lot of different ways. You can use your Channel Divinity to deal extra necrotic damage to the target. The damage equals 5 plus twice your cleric level. That's a pretty significant bonus. So when you think about the amount of time or amount of levels you're going to put into a multi-class, it's usually around like 4 to 6, depending on, right? You want to try to either get a feat online, some sort of early capability, or one of the really good abilities that happens at 6. So let's just say you're doing 6. That is 17 damage if it uses the D&D 5e rules. So 17 damage added in for your Touch of Death, which is pretty cool. Remember, Channel Divinity will refresh on a short rest, so it allows you to use this capability quite a bit. With Inescapable Destruction at level 6, we get some more fun stuff. Necrotic damage dealt by your cleric spells and Channel Divinity options ignores resistance to necrotic damage. Now, I don't know what the wording is going to be like in the game. Typically, stuff like this in Baldur's Gate does not have specific wording that is relative to classes. What I mean by that is, this says necrotic damage dealt by your cleric spells. Oftentimes it'll just say necrotic damage dealt by your spells, which is important, an important distinction, or necrotic damage you deal, so that you're not relegated. Okay, well, if I only cast the spells from my cleric, they're the only ones that are going to ignore the resistance. So I would hope in Baldur's Gate, this just says necrotic damage dealt by you, ignores resistance, because necrotic, while a really cool damage type, is a very heavily resisted damage type, especially throughout all of Act 2 and a lot of Act 3. So this would unlock the Death Domain Cleric to actually be accessible and usable long-term throughout your play, rather than just simply go, oh, cool, I jumped into this class that's just getting resisted left and right. So being able to completely shut that down is sick. Now, another cool thing is Divine Strike. Unfortunately, not a lot of multi-classing with the Cleric really leverages Divine Strike. And this is at level 8, which is, again, that kind of break point. I think it's 7 in Baldur's Gate 3 is Divine Strike. Let me just type over here on this other side of the screen that you cannot currently see right now. Divine Strike usually happens at level 8. Okay, never mind. I thought it was 7. Usually you don't take a cleric to level 8 for multi-classing. You usually spice into something earlier, which is unfortunate because I think Divine Strike is very fun. But again, it just doesn't really ever kind of pan out. But for Divine Strike here, for this, of course, it's necrotic focused. So once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to deal an extra 1d8 necrotic damage to the target. When you reach the 14th level, the extra damage increases to 2d8, which probably would not be a thing. Now, Improved Reaper, I could actually see coming to the game because of the way that they do a lot of the capabilities with these subclasses. I could see this being like a level 11 capability for Domain Cleric, rewarding those that go heavy and hard in the paint in a pure Domain Cleric. So what this would happen here is, starting at the 17th level, but again, I'm saying this could happen at like level 11 as a possibility. When you cast a necromancy spell of the 1st through 5th level that targets only one creature, that spell can instead target 2 creatures within the range of within 5 feet of each other. So why this is different than Reaper here, this is at 1st level, you can learn 1 necromancy cantrip of your choice when you cast a necromancy cantrip. So only cantrips work with Reaper. Improved Reaper works with spells 1st through 5th level. So a real cool option to just add a ton of really fun spice into the wisdom options for your character. But even then, if you just wanted to go into a fighter and have a lot of fun with this, you could go a lot of really cool directions with going specifically into Battle Master, a champion, to add basically like some sort of like kind of Death Knight style of character that just uses tons of necrotic damage. I really want to explore this one, especially when the patch goes live. Next up, for the Druid Circle of Stars, we get another character that is going to really lean into the shape-shifting portion of Druid, which is nice. We get to really have some fun with that. That is outside of the Circle of Moon. And with this, we have the starry forms. We'll talk about all 3 of them in a second here. That's the only thing we know that's coming to Baldur's Gate 3 are those starry forms. They haven't talked about anything else, but it's the Archer, the Chalice, and the Dragon. And we're going to talk about those in a little bit here because they're different. Well, the Dragon is different in the way that they're interpreting it in Baldur's Gate 3 than it is otherwise. So With the Circle of Stars, we have a star map, and I'm not sure if we're going to be getting this in the game, but it gives you the guidance cantrip just out the gate. You have the Guiding Bolt spell prepared, and it counts as a Druid spell for you, and it doesn't count as against the number of spells you can have prepared. And also, you can cast Guiding Bolt without expending a spell slot. You can do so a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. I don't know if they're going to bring this in at all or not, but the cool thing about the Circle of Stars Druid is that it's going to play like a Druid that has the capability to shapeshift, but also borrows some of the divination capabilities of a divination wizard. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So here's Starry Form. All this is like kind of the details of what it looks like to do it in tabletop. We don't need to worry about that. But here's the Archer, and we know here's the actual patch notes. The Archer deals radiant damage with astral arrows. The life-giving Chalice restores hit points to you and others nearby. And the Wise Dragon, allowing you to deal damage with an added bonus to Constitution rolls. So we'll take a look at the dragon in a second. You can see it's marked in red because it's way different. So with Archer, when you activate this form, and as a bonus action on your subsequent turns while it lasts, you can make a ranged spell attack, hurling a luminous arrow that targets one creature within 60 feet of you. On a hit, the attack deals radiant damage equal to 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier. Now, we know that radiant builds in this game are disgustingly good. There's so many ways to improve your radiant damage capabilities. Luminous armor, all sorts of crazy stuff. So what we see here is a way to really lean into that for a Druid. And, you know, I'm not really sure how luminous armor and all of the luminous kit, quote unquote, work when it comes to being equipped on a character that goes into shapeshift form, because all the data that I have for shapeshift stuff is more about like relevant melee weapons that are going to help with certain things that don't deal radiant damage, because the Circle of the Moon doesn't by and large deal radiant damage. So we'll have to test if those items work with the Archer. But again, we already know that radiant can be firmly abused in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, the Chalice is interesting here. So whenever you cast a spell using a spell slot that restores hit points to a creature, you or another creature within 30 feet of you can regain hit points equal to 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier. So if you want to really focus on being a support healing style of Druid, this gives you a capability to just have tons of healing coming out of your character, which is really, really, really fun. Right? You can go ahead and use any kind of cure or heal you want, and then you get an additional 1d8 plus wisdom modifier. That's probably going to be anywhere from like a 3 to 5, depending on what's going to happen with your wisdom. So you have that nice setup as well. Now, Dragon in tabletop is different. When you make an intelligence or wisdom check or constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on a spell, you can treat a roll of 9 or lower on the d20 as a 10. I don't know what that means. I'm sorry. No, I know what that means, but I don't know how that's going to translate to BG3. We get something similar like this with the Rogue, right? The Rogue has their capability that can never roll lower than a 10 on certain things as it pertains to, I think it's lockpicking. So if that's what the patch notes are saying, it's for the dragon, allowing you to deal damage with an added bonus to constitution rolls. So maybe this is the bonus to constitution rolls, but they were thinking, okay, the dragon kind of feels a little lackluster. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's a damage bonus towards fire damage, as fire is a very prevalent damage type that you can use as a Druid. Or if it's just a flat damage bonus, maybe based off of wisdom modifier, I'm not really sure. So we'll have to see how the dragon actually pans out for Baldur's Gate 3, because on tabletop it's comparatively lackluster compared to the other two for Baldur's Gate 3, which have direct damage bonus towards radiant, a really great way to heal, and then good concentration, which isn't bad, right? Concentration spells are really, really good. So we'll have to see what that looks like. And this is what the in-game look of just kind of prepping a chalice, the form of the chalice right there. You can see the little chalice popping up in constellation form, and how that's going to look is probably going to be pretty damn cool. Now, we do have some other capabilities here. Cosmic Omen is what I was talking about with the divination wizard, right? So every time you do a long rest, you roll a die, and if the die is even, you have wheel. If it's odd, you have woe. So what happens here? Anytime a creature within 30 feet of you is about to make an attack roll, a saving throw, or an ability check, you can use your reaction to roll a d6 and add the number roll to the total. So I could see this being interpreted as the same thing, almost like you have with a divination wizard, right? You can use those rolls. You have those canned dice that you can use when certain things happen. I could see it being used exact same way, where you have your die that you roll for the wheel or odd, where it's the same exact scenario, only this time you subtract the number rolled from the total. This gives you a lot of really cool ways to play around with the rolls that are happening around you as a support character for a druid. Now, with the number of dice, you can use this reaction a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So I somehow bit my lip while talking just now, and that really didn't feel great. And I don't know if they're going to add that into the game as is, or if it's just a set number all the way through. But this as a cascading number of the amount of, I think that's what we get, 3, 4, and 5. No, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6. It's 4, 5, and 6. I don't remember the actual bonus for our proficiency now anymore. God, it's been all these damn videos that I made, and I can't remember a simple thing. BG3 proficiency bonus. Yeah, it's 2, 3, and then eventually becomes 4. So clearly I am so good at what I'm doing here. But again, my point remains here that this would be a really cool way to give us cascading dice as we level up through the game as this character. So it could be a lot of fun to give that Cosmic Omen, giving that divination capability. Lastly, we have Twinkling Constellations, which basically just increases the damage, increases the healing, and you get flying speed with the dragon. Also, you can change which constellation glimmers on your body in the midst of being shapeshifted. Then Full of Stars, even though this is level 14 capability, I could see this being added in because we have so many of these things on the other shapeshifting capabilities, but it gives your all of your incorporeal forms resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. So I could see this just being added in as a level 10 or level 11 thing, much like we have for Circle of the Moon, getting plenty of bonuses throughout the leveling curve of Druid. But this just adds a really cool way to play Druid in a lot of really fun support ways that you could then layer this in with any of the other classes that are going to be focusing on support. If you wanted to go with a Cleric, you could do so. Yeah, you're going to be jumping into a different spellcasting ability, but you could go Bard as well to add in some more fun stuff. So there's a lot of really cool ways that you could go here with the Circle of Stars. Paladin, we have the Oath of the Crown. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not as stoked for this oath. I was hoping we get something like Oath of Conquest officially added into the game versus the mod that we've got right now, because this gives us a character that's a little bit more, not a true evil paladin, but a more cruel paladin than, say, like a Paladin of Vengeance, which is more of like a ends justify the means types of paladin. But here's the patch notes here. For the Oath of the Crown, you've sworn to uphold the principles of law. Stay true to your oath, and you'll be rewarded with power to aid your allies and disrupt your foes. Guide your companions in battle with righteous clarity, taunt enemies with strategic interrupts, and keep your party standing with the divine allegiance, absorbing their damage while restoring their health. So some of these have been interpreted in some pretty interesting ways, so it should be interesting to see how they work. But the problem I kind of have with Oath of the Crown is it fits probably tenets-wise very similar to the Oath of Devotion. So we'll see how these two probably shake themselves out come the Baldur's Gate 3 launch of them. And as far as your oath spells, as it were, we have access to Command, Compelled Duel, Warding Bond, Zone of Truth, which is not in Baldur's Gate, Aura of Vitality, which is actually Warden of Vitality in Baldur's Gate, Spirit Guardians, Banishment, Guardian of Faith, Circle of Power, and Geese are not in Baldur's Gate either, so we don't have to worry about those. I don't know what representation 2 will be seeing with those. The nice thing here is, this is a clear difference for Oath of Devotion, right? Which gets stuff like Lesser Restoration and Silence and Remove Curse and Beacon of Hope. So hopefully a lot of these will give us a little bit of difference. It is worth noting too that like Warden of Vitality is a level 9 spell that characters get access to. You're just going to have this because you're going to be what's this called? Oath of the Crown Paladin. And Warden of Vitality is like the best heal in the game. So it's pretty cool. So what's interesting is that this kind of strikes a balance between Oath of Devotion and Oath of the Ancients, giving us some support and healing capabilities, but some now true tanking capabilities. So your Channel Divinity, You have two different ones, and I'm not really sure how this is all going to work out, because Righteous Clarity, if I just press this and type this, you can see is not an actual capability in 5th edition. So it looks like they've done something here. So it says guide your companions in battle with Righteous Clarity. Since that's not something in tabletop, I'm assuming that the Baldur's Gate 3 version gives us some form of mobility with that. And maybe it's a channel divinity, whatever it is. But in tabletop, we have Champions Challenge, which is the taunt that they're talking about in the patch notes. Each creature of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, a creature can't willingly move more than 30 feet away from you. This effect ends with the creature if you're incapacitated or die. So this is kind of a true to form taunt. It locks them within range of you. It doesn't, it says compels that creature to do battle with you. It just says it locks them within range. So I'm wondering if it's actually going to compel them to do battle with you. How this Champions Challenge works in BG3 is going to be interesting. But Turn the Tide is going to be cool too. So each creature of your choice that can hear you within 30 feet of you regains hit points equal to 1d6 plus your charisma modifier that has no more than half of its hit points. So it's just a nice emergency heal. You have tons of other emergency heals, right? You've got your lay on hands capabilities. I don't think that this is better than the Oath of Ancients AoE heal, which heals twice, once the round you cast it, once again on the round after. But it is just a nice capability you've got. Now, for Divine Allegiance, those that have played Final Fantasy VI, or the American version is Final Fantasy II, and they've played with Cecil, who is the Paladin in that game, Cecil has a capability where he'll jump in front of someone at their low health, right, and take the damage. Well, Divine Allegiance kind of does that for you. So starting at the 7th level, when a creature within 5 feet of you takes damage, you can use a reaction to magically substitute your own health for that of the target creature, causing that creature not to take the damage. But in the patch notes, it says, keep your party standing strong with Divine Allegiance, absorbing their damage while restoring their health. So it looks like they've added an additional layer here. So yeah, you're going to take the damage, but now you're also going to heal the person that was going to take that damage. Whether that damage amount is maybe the Turn the Tide's 1d6 plus charisma modifier, whether that damage is whatever value, it's a cool way to kind of differentiate yourself here from BG3 in the tabletop. What I think, though, is the biggest issue is that 5 feet. That 5 feet thing, you're just never 5 feet away from a backline character in Baldur's Gate 3. You're usually just so much further away. So I hope this is something like 30 feet away from you, so you can actually have a lot of playtime with this. It's kind of the crappy thing with both the auras and some of the other capabilities as Paladin. It requires you to be way too close to things. So I'm hoping that this gives us a good range to actually have it affect things around you rather than just 5 feet. That's just going to be other melee characters at that point, which is still pretty helpful. Unyielding Saint here is a 15th level thing that avoids being paralyzed or stunned. And Exalted Champion gives us resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Allies have advantage on death saving throws and advantage on wisdom saving throws. So what you've noticed, or what you'll probably notice, is that there's no aura for this oath. Much in the same way that Oath of Vengeance doesn't have an aura either. It gets Relentless Avenger, right? Which just gives us the capability. If you hit with an enemy with an opportunity attack, your movement speed increases by 15 feet on your next turn. So for their level 7 subclass aura, I would imagine it would be either maybe like Unyielding Saint for just give you immunity to paralyze and stun, or give you Exalted Champion and just give it like resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons. Some way to really amp up that tanking profile, especially if you are going to be able to jump in and take damage from people. Being able to mitigate that against yourself would be huge. Now, tabletop does say this damage to you can't be reduced or prevented in any way. I doubt they put that in Baldur's Gate 3 because there's just so much of that already going on. So Exalted Champion or Unyielding Saint as your level 7 capability for the I keep wanting to say Oath of the Tenet. Oath of the Crown is going to make probably a lot of sense, but I can see this being a really fun way to turn on a true actual tank in Baldur's Gate 3, not the ones that we've shoehorned into a tanking role, which really can't stop people from going past them, right? Like, if your Paladin is Oath of the Devotion, you're trying to be a tank character and you run up to someone and you attack them, they're just going to either break away from you, run away from you, deal with the actual opportunity attack, whatever the situation is, but this locks them into range with you, which I think is a real cool way to create a true tank that's going to be a lot of fun to spice in different directions, or it's just a pure Paladin class. Fighter gets the Arcane Archer, and this is something I'm actually really excited for. This is one of my favorite subclasses for Fighter. It's one that's also been very requested as an option for a build. People told me, like, how do you make the Arcane Archer in Baldur's Gate 3? Unfortunately, Baldur's Gate 3 does not have access to a ton of the arrow spells in the game. And even then, they're even locked behind, like, say, the Rangers gets access to the lightning arrow where no one else does. So Arcane Archer is going to give us a lot of fun capabilities. And the patch notes are super vague. They just simply say that there's new shooting animations for one, but it only mentions 2 arrows. Banish foes to the Feywild, removing them from the battlefield for a turn, or unleash psychic damage that forces enemies to make a wisdom saving throw or be blinded until the start of their next turn. There's way more than that. So Arcane Archer will blend together not Battlemaster's capabilities, but the way you select your capabilities for a Battlemaster. So with Arcane Shot, at the 3rd level, you get 2 Arcane Shot options. We're going to go through those at the bottom. And then you'll have access to more Arcane Shots at 7th, 10th, 15th, and 18th levels, probably just 7th and 10th, depending on how they're really going to kind of break that apart, right? Like, we know for Fighter with the Battlemaster gets access to their maneuvers at level 3, then they get more maneuvers at level 7, and then they get improved maneuvers at level 10 with more maneuvers. So it'll probably be just the same thing, right? 3, 7, and 10 with either improvements or additional ones added in. So I guess also once per turn, when you fire an arrow from a short bow or a long bow as part of the attack action, you can apply one of your Arcane Shot options to that arrow. You can decide to use the option when the arrow hits, unless the option doesn't involve an attack roll. You have 2 uses of this ability, and you regain all expended uses of it when you finish a short or long rest. I don't know if they're going to increase that, how that's going to work, whatever the situation is, but it gives you a sense of how this plays out in tabletop. Now for Magic Arrow, at level 7th, you can gain the ability to infuse arrows with magic. Whenever you fire a non-magical arrow from a short or longbow, you can make it magical for the purposes of overcoming resistances and immunity to non-magical attacks. So this just makes all bows magical for just breaking through resistances that would otherwise negate mundane damage. I could see this easily being added in. Also a cool one at 7 is Curving Shot. When you make an attack roll with a magic arrow and miss, you can use a bonus action to re-roll the attack roll against a different target. I think that's really sick if we're allowed to do that. But what's cool though, in tabletop, this is a different target within 60 feet of the original target. So it could be a cool way to kind of, oh, well, I missed the target I wanted to hit, but now I can hit a target that's further away than I was able to before. So that could be a cool way to do this. An Ever Ready Shot here is, if you roll initiative and have no uses of Arcane Shot remaining, you regain 1 use of it, which is a cool way to keep momentum on the character, right? You always have access to an Arcane Shot, regardless of whether you're doing a long or short rest. So this is a cool way to keep that momentum on the Arcane Archer, which is something I could see them putting in at a 10th level for the Arcane Archer in Baldur's Gate 3, rather than relegating it just to level 15. Now, Arcane Archer has all these Arcane Shot options. Let's talk about them. So the first one here is one that they talked about in the patch notes. Banishing Arrow, you use Abjuration magic to try to temporarily banish your target to a harmless location in the Feywild. The creature hit by the arrow must succeed a Charisma saving throw or be banished. While banished, speed 0, incapacitated, blah, 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 blah. But it does get improvements. So at level 18, a target also takes 2d6 force damage when the arrow hits. I could see some of these benefits coming in on level 10 or something like that. Something that improves the damage of the class. And I think that you probably need something like that. Otherwise, I feel like the Arcane Archer might fall off and it might not be a worthwhile option, because Arcane Archer could be probably pretty fun to multi-class with a Hunter Ranger to just really be an arching? That is not a term. An archer powerhouse. Good Lord. But it could be cool too to spice this in with a Sword Bard, because remember, Sword Bard capabilities are ranged. This gives you now elemental and fun range capabilities to have you warp around, increase your AC, a lot of fun stuff with this. But that was Banishing Arrow, basically just remove something from play and does force damage with improvements. Beguiling Arrow, temporarily beguiles a target. Creatures hit by an arrow takes 2d6 psychic damage and choose one of your allies within 30 feet of the target. The target must succeed a wisdom saving throw or is charmed by the chosen ally. So you can really push this together with the new College of Glamour, right? Since it's considered charmed by that character, they can do commands on it and stuff like that. A lot of fun things. Bursting Arrow here, you basically are going to do force energy. So it's 2d6 force damage, which is really, really fun. And it does a big 10-foot AoE burst with it. Enfeebling Arrow is necrotic damage and does 2d6 necrotic damage. And also, most of the stuff that does damage, it will do even if you save against it. So weapon attack is halved until the start of your... Oh, I'm sorry. Target must succeed a Constitution saving throw, or the damage dealt by its weapon attacks is halved until the start of your next turn. Sorry, I thought this was damage would have been halved. That's later down here. Whoops. But that's a cool mechanic if that actually comes through. Grasping Arrow. You know what they might actually do? These secondary bonuses might come through at level 10 rather than it doing way more damage, right? Like 4d6 is a huge damage increase to that capability. So maybe what they would do is they would just add another set of effects for each one of the arrows rather than adding more damage. But who knows? You don't have a lot of uses for this for 4d6 to be game breaking, right? 2 uses in the tabletop vanilla version in a battle. So it's not like you're just going to be spamming Enfeebling Arrow every round as a archer, because you just can't. You don't have enough uses, depending again how they make that work. Grasping Arrow is pretty gnarly. It of course locks things down. They take 2d6 poison, that speed's reduced, and they take 2d6 slashing damage the first time on each turn it moves 1 foot or more. That's really rough. Like, this is a really good arrow. Poison damage increase and what have you. Piercing Arrow is pretty wild. It shoots a 1 foot wide, 30 foot long column. It ignores everything for the most part, like ignores cover, passes through objects, but each creature in that line must take a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes damage as if it were hit by the arrow plus an extra 1d6 piercing. So this is a way to really amp out a lot of damage and a really cool line of damage ahead of you, because you're doing your weapon's damage plus 1d6, and still they take half damage even if they save against it, which is pretty cool. Seeking Arrow and Shadow Arrow are last 2, but you use Divination Magic, you grant your arrow the ability to seek out your target, allowing the arrow to curve and twist its path in search of its prey. Whenever you use this option, you don't make an attack roll for the attack. Instead, choose one creature you've seen in the past minute. I don't know how they would do that. The arrow flies toward that creature, moving around corners if necessary. If the target is within rampant range and there's a path large enough, blah, blah, blah. The target must make a dexterity saving throw. Failed save, it takes damage as if it were hit by the arrow, plus an extra 1d6 force damage, and you learn the target's current location. On a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and you don't learn its location. I don't know how the learning of location would work here. Maybe it might work like applying something like Fairy Fire. I'm not sure, where it creates advantage and disadvantage. Who's to say? Then the last one is what they mentioned in the patch notes as well, is that this does psychic damage with the Shadow Arrow, and they must succeed a wisdom saving throw or become blinded. I can't see anything within 5 feet away from them. So very fun, really cool way to be adding in Arcane Archer to the game. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with all this, but you can see there's lots of really cool multi-class options for already existing fun, powerful Archer builds. This is just going to add even more spice to that. For the Monk, we have Drunken Master, and this seems to be a whole homebrew approach to the way of the Drunken Master. So let me read the patch note here. Putting the brew in homebrew, as the Drunken Master, you have the ability to consume alcohol straight from your inventory, as well as drink from bottles you see around the Sword Coast in order to recover ki. By sharing the bottle with your enemies using Intoxicating Strike, you'll generate a buff towards your armor class and your chance to hit drunk targets. Drunk enemies are also susceptible to the Drunken Master's other abilities like Sobering Realization, which sobers up drunk targets, dealing physical damage, physical and psychic damage. So I don't think much of anything from tabletop is really going to make its way in, but we'll talk about what we've got. Bonus proficiencies here is not really going to matter. It grants you performance, but you get proficiency in brewer supplies. So that's not going to really matter here. Drunken technique might make its way in. So basically, whenever you use Flurry of Blows, you gain the benefit of disengage action, and your walking speed is increased by 10 feet until the end of the current turn. I could see that being built into the homebrew Drunken Master for Baldur's Gate 3 for 100%. That's a pretty cool way to kind of give the mobility of the character, which is a kind of a token thing of the Brewmaster, is lots of mobility and getting out of things that would otherwise slow your character down. For example, here, leap to your feet. Whenever you're prone, you can stand up by spending 5 feet of movement rather than half your speed. And redirect attack. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can spend 1 key point as a reaction to cause that attack to hit one creature of your choice, other than the attacker that you can see within 5 feet of you. I would see both of these kind of coming into Baldur's Gate for the Drunken Master. And I just think that kind of fit the overall approach to the character and how they're kind of talking about things. Intoxicating Strike and Sobering Realization are not really things in tabletop. We have Intoxicated Frenzy. At level 17th, you gain the ability to make an overwhelming number of attacks against a group of enemies, but that doesn't seem like what we get here with Intoxicating Strike, which you generate a buff towards your armor class and your chance to hit drunk targets, because you're basically making everyone around you drunk. Drunkard's Luck is our last ability here. You always seem to get a lucky bounce at the right moment. Whenever you make an ability check, an attack roll, or a saving throw and have a disadvantage, you can spend 2 key points to cancel the disadvantage for that roll. So you can see everything that's coming with the Drunken Master is something that's entirely new, and I'm all for it. What's really nice about the way that Baldur's Gate is approached, or Larian has approached the monk, is they've made the monk a lot more fun and interesting than it was in tabletop. So I think this is another example of, yeah, these seem all super situational in tabletop, but the Drunken Master, at least how it's being realized by Larian, seems to be a lot more fun and applicable to the game and just having fun in general. Getting a little bit more homebrew love, we have the Ranger Swarmkeeper. So we have something that's pretty reminiscent to this in tabletop. The Gathered Swarm capability, which is a swarm of intangible nature spirits, has bonded itself to you and can assist you in battle. But from the patch notes, here's what they are. The Cloud of Jellyfish deals extra lightning damage, potentially shocking your enemy. The Flurry of Moths deals psychic damage, giving you the potential to blind your enemy. The Legion of Bees deal piercing damage and forces the enemy to make a strength saving throw or be knocked back 15 feet. Each swarm also has the ability to provide you the teleportation, or you with teleportation capabilities. So you basically choose a appearance here based off of a D4 roll. But you can see once on each of your turns, you can cause the swarm to assist you in the following ways, which is pretty much like this. This is the swarm of bees. The attacks target takes. Yeah, I guess I guess attack is possessive. I was like, who? You mean the attacker? No, yeah, the attack's target takes 1d6 piercing damage from the swarm. The attack's target must succeed on a strength saving throw against your spell save DC or be moved by the swarm up to 15 feet. And you are moved by the swarm 5 feet horizontally in a direction of your choice. And we can see what that looks like from the actual game. So we don't really know, this doesn't this have the ability to, I don't know, there's a way to like take a look at a GIF and make it like pause. So this is the ability, this is from the jellyfish one, but this does give us a very small little teleport, as you can see. So we actually can move around with more than just simply the swarm of bees, but this is what the swarm of bees would look like. But we have Swarmkeeper magic here, which gives us Mage Hand. I hope with this patch, with another class getting a Mage Hand cantrip and a focus on it in some way, shape, or form, Mage Hand is just better in BG3. It's unfortunately not, but I think it's an issue of the constraints of Mage Hand in a, I don't want to say a linear video game, but in a video game where you can't say stuff like, can I pull that book off the shelf and throw it at them like you can in D&D, you know what I mean? So I'm hoping Mage Hand gets a little bit of a Robustamante buff. But here are the spells that we're going to be getting, hopefully, with Swarmkeeper: Fairy Fire, Mage Hand, Web, Gaseous Form, and then Arcane Eye and Insect Plague. I don't know if we would get into their class because of the limitations on the levels, but that's an example of what we would get from Swarmkeeper. Lastly, we have here, last couple ones we have are Writhing Tide. Beginning at the 7th level, you can condense part of your swarm into a focused mass that lifts you up. As a bonus action, you gain a flying speed of 10 feet and can hover. This effect lasts for 1 minute until you are capacitated. So I could see this coming in as some form of hover capability. And it's interesting too, because Swarmkeeper almost, it has a lot of really interesting characteristics, almost like you're a caster. So can you combine the ranger here with a druid, the ranger with a cleric, a nature cleric, maybe even specifically, maybe a storm cleric, to make your jellyfish just be destructive, right? Make them really do some fun stuff here. So you could probably get a lot of really fun use out of this, because Writhing Tide is very similar to the way that a draconic, the storm sorcerer can work, can kind of move around, right, with the ability to fly. So maybe you can get something kind of similar to that with Writhing Tide. But this, of course, requires you to use a bonus action to get this going. So I wonder how that kind of plays out. Mighty Swarm basically allows you to increase the damage of your swarms and have them do more. I could see that coming in to this. And Swarming Dispersal allows you to basically use your swarm to then get resistance to a specific damage type, which could be really cool as a defensive characteristic for the ranger, something that we don't typically see with the ranger outside of getting just heavy armor outright. So I don't know, I'm not sure we would get Swarming Dispersal. Mighty Swarm would make sense though, just to kind of make the ranger's capabilities scale. Almost everything in Baldur's Gate 3 has some point where their damage of their specific subclasses capabilities does scale, and I think you just absolutely need it. This says at level 11, it would probably happen around level 6 or 7 for a Swarmkeeper, but Swarmkeeper could be a really interesting way to pull in lots of different damage types and give some displacement to the ranger in whatever way they want to play, melee or ranged, if they want to mix this in with other classes. And it's going to be interesting to see how you use these abilities too. Yeah, sure, it says bonus action, but this could be something that could be fun brought into a lot of other classes, maybe even with a barbarian, depending on how these abilities are used. Maybe you can't use spells while you're enraged, but you can use non-spells or class abilities, as it were, that the barbarian can leverage themselves into with a lot of other fun combinations. For the rogue, Swashbuckler is added into the game, which is basically a archetype or a subclass for rogue that wants you to play around more with charisma than just your typical dexterity rogue. But I'm not sure how we're going to see that with Baldur's Gate 3. Here's the patch notes. This rogue subclass introduces a range of new actions fit for the piratical life. Play dirty by tossing sand at enemies to blind them, flick your weapon at a target to disarm them, or use your new fancy footwork passive while meleeing your enemy to ensure they can't make opportunity attacks against you for the rest of your turn. And we get fancy footwork right here represented the exact same way. During your turn, if you make a melee attack against a creature, that creature can't make opportunity attacks against you for the rest of your turn. Really cool way to add a lot of mobility to the class. But as soon as we go into the other abilities here, it immediately departs from what Larian was saying their Swashbuckler is going to do. So Rakish Audacity, you can give yourself a bonus to your initiative rolls equal to your charisma modifier. You also get an additional way to use your sneak attack. You don't need advantage on the attack roll to use your sneak attack against a creature if you're within 5 feet of it. No other creatures within 5 feet of you, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. So basically, more of a duelist, and even says duelists and pirates typically belong to this archetype. So if you are soloing something one-on-one, you're not around anyone else, they're not around anyone else, and you don't have disadvantage, you can use a sneak attack. And I would really like to see this brought in as a way to make more of a brawler style of rogue, which is what the Swashbuckler kind of is, right? It's less of a stealthy character, more of an upfront damage character, while using lots of mitigation via special rules versus mitigation via AC like a fighter would be. So I would like to see Rakish Audacity added in that way, shape, or form. I don't know if we would see this. You can give yourself a bonus to your initiative rolls equal to your charisma modifier. If they did build charisma into this, it could be a very fun way to make rogue and warlock make even more sense as a multi-class. Because typically if you're going rogue, you're just dropping those 2 levels in to get thief to get your bonus action, right? Or 3 levels for the bonus action on thief, which is just become, that's kind of the problem here with the Swashbuckler as it looks at tabletop, and as we're kind of comparing it to BG3. Too often BG3 subclasses and builds, they're so limited in their levels that people are forced to kind of min-max them in some way, shape, or form, right? Because you just, okay, I'm only going to take these levels. I'm going to do so many more things over here. So I have so much more in the character I want to play. So I hope this opens up more possibilities for the rogue, which oftentimes feels like you're just going to go with the Gloomstalker rogue, or some sort of rogue into another class to give it more bonus actions. So hopefully that we get more benefits here. And to breaking the rules of sneak attack 2 for this is really fun. For Panache, it's also a really interesting one. As an action, you can make a charisma check by a creature's wisdom check. The creature must be able to hear you, and the two of you must share a language. But if you succeed on the check and the creature is hostile to you, it has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you and can't make opportunity attacks against targets other than you. So I don't know if we would get anything like this, because also if you succeed on the check, the creature isn't hostile to you, it is charmed by you. So maybe this gives us some sort of really cool way to basically turn on friends out of combat. Like if Panache is not a combat capability for Baldur's Gate 3's version of the Swashbuckler, and it just makes your character kind of have that friends capability without using friends, which can be a hostile action on honor mode. It could be a cool way to bring that in, I think. And it makes, the Swashbuckler more of a charismatic type of character. But we know that we're going to have some way to play dirty and toss sand to blind things and flick your weapon to disarm things. So we see that stuff. Two other capabilities here are Elegant Maneuver. You can use your bonus action on your turn to gain advantage on the next Dexterity Acrobatics or Strength Acrobatics check you make during the same turn. It was okay, Shove is cool. Acrobatics ain't so much of a thing, but you're using this to give you an advantage on resisting those things, hopefully. We'll see. It says during the same turn, so we'll see. I don't think that this would make itself in. I could see it being as a passive that people would kind of bypass or just kind of look over. Master Duelist is a cool one, though. If you miss a target with a melee attack, you can roll it again with advantage. And I would love to see this brought into the Swashbuckler as a cool way to, again, keep it online with a brawler character that just keeps damage up the whole time. If you miss an attack roll, you roll it again with advantage. Really cool way. But again, it's a once every long or short rest too. So it does have kind of an exhausting currency that you got to use alongside it. But Swashbuckler is a cool way to be more of an upfront and personal rogue that you can see mixed in with other types of up close and personal charisma-based archetypes. A sword bard, a warlock. We're going to talk about warlock and sorcerer next, and then warlock. Hexblade could be fun with this, or just Pact of the Blade in general could be fun with this. This could be fun with a paladin. So cool ways to bring Swashbuckler into other classes that are focusing on charisma. Sorcerer will be getting access to shadow magic. And shadow magic is pretty interesting here. Here's the patch notes. As a shadow magic sorcerer, you deal in a form of magic that makes you deadliest in darkness. The subclass gives its sorcerer superior dark vision, as well as the ability to shadow walk between places of dim light or darkness. It also lets you call forth the perfectly homebrewed Hound of Ill Omen to harass your foes, and use Strength of the Grave to prevent you from being downed. Ideal for those attempting honor mode runs, and we'll talk about that one in a sec. But my problem right now with shadow magic on paper is that it's going to need something to make it compete with Storm Sorcery and Draconic Bloodline, which are so strong, because Storm Sorcery you can really amp up damage, and Draconic Bloodline you can amp up damage. So we need something that kind of plays alongside that. Hopefully Larian knows that, which they're pretty good about these things, and they'll have a whole suite of things to make shadow magic very accessible and worthwhile to sorcerers that want to use it. Because wild magic is fun and quirky, but it's not like super damagey, right? So shadow magic will need some love here, because we're going to take a look that Eyes of the Dark is what they were talking about with the dark vision capability. But what's cool here is when you reach level 3, you'll learn the darkness spell. And if you cast it using sorcery points, because you can use sorcery points or by expending a spell slot in the tabletop, but if you cast with sorcery points, you can see through the darkness created by the spell. So that's a pretty nifty little capability. Maybe they just have that default. They can always see through darkness, since darkness is such a prevalent capability that is used against you in Baldur's Gate 3. I would love that as just a function. Strength of the Grave is what was mentioned in the patch notes here, but basically whenever you take critical hits, or I'm sorry, not critical hits, whenever you take fatal damage over anything, anytime you take damage that reduces you to 0 hit points, you can just read it. I don't have to paraphrase like an idiot. You make a charisma saving throw, DC 5 plus the damage taken. On a success, you instead drop to 1 hit point. You cannot use this feature if you're reduced to 0 hit points by radiant or a critical hit. I'm not sure if they would keep that in or not, but it's a pretty cool capability that just gets you a get out of jail free card. And I'm wondering too, if you have Strength of the Grave and you're a half orc who has endurance, do you get both capabilities? Does one take precedent over the other? Do they negate each other? How does this all work? That could be pretty cool capability to stack that, making a half orc a really cool choice for a shadow. What's it called? Shadow magic sorcerer. Especially if you wanted to make a oh god, who's the Warcraft character? Not Zeratul. The Warlock in Warcraft. That is a big character that I just cannot think of right now. But a themed character like that could be pretty fun. Now, Hound of Ill Omen. It sounds like they have a whole different homebrew of how the Hound of Ill Omen will work. But just let me go through this. As a bonus action, you can spend 3 sorcery points to summon a Hound of Ill Omen to target one creature you can see within 120 feet. The Hound uses the direwolf statistics with the following changes. It does have 10 hit points, equal to half your sorcerer level. That was the big thing I wanted to point out. And it can also just move through objects, so it has tons of mobility. Its damage, we'll have to just see how it all pans out. I don't know the direwolf stats at the top of my head, but if it's anything like the Ranger, I would hope those stats would then maybe scale off of sorcery points invested if you do that, however it works, to give you a summon that is quite strong. This makes the Sorcerer a pretty cool one that you could jump into with like the Pact of Chain for the Sorcerer, or maybe even for the Warlock, sorry. Or is it Pact of Tome? Whichever one, yeah, Chain. Chain gives you a little gremlin to be with. But maybe you could do something cool with some of the summons from wisdom-based druid, or a wisdom-based druid character that could do tons of summons as well. So maybe there's something that you could really have some fun with here. But again, there has to be something that does additional damage with the character, something that makes it worthwhile to choose, aside from just simply, okay, I can't be killed. I can't be killed as easily because I get a jail out of free card. I get a superior dark vision, and I get Shadow Walk. Needs a little bit more love, I think. Shadow Walk here, you get the ability to step from one shadow to another, much in the same way that our Shadow Monk can, which is a really cool capability. When you're in dim light or darkness, as a bonus action, you can teleport 120 feet to another dim light or darkness location. Umbral Form is a level 18 ability. In this form, you have resistance to all damage type except Force and Radiance. And you can move through other creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain. So maybe this is how you offset things, but as a level 11 ability with Umbral Form, it might not be worth the full investment that the sorcerer required to get to it. Again, I think it maybe needs something where if you are in dim or low light, you can get some additional damage, some additional advantage towards attack roll, things like, what's something that does an attack roll off the top of my head? I can't think of a spell that does an attack roll. Maybe you get an advantage on it, or maybe it's harder to resist your spells if you are in dim or darkness, or something that is in dim or darkness. It's harder for them to resist your spells, whatever the situation is, that makes shadow magic have a lot of really cool connotations towards shadow stuff, which is already very prevalent in Baldur's Gate. There's tons of abilities, tons of items that give you benefits in dim or low light settings to give you critical hits or whatever it is. This is it. Probably the most requested or enjoyed subclass of all the subclasses on this list is the Warlock's Hexblade. Here is the patch notes. Let me just read this real quick. Hexblade Warlocks make a pact with an entity from the Shadowfell that manifests in the form of magical weapons. Curse your enemies and force their souls to do your bidding. Slay an enemy that isn't generally an element of nature, construct, giant blob, or already dead, and you'll be able to raise their spirit from their corpse for 10 turns. This new summon can deal necrotic damage and will rip away a chunk of your enemy's soul to provide your Hexblade Warlock with healing. There are so many options. There are so many cool options for this character. I'm very excited for it. Let me reset myself there for a sec. So for the Warlock here, we could jump this into Fighter. We can go into the new Death Domain. We can go into the new Sorcerer we just talked about, the Shadows, and play into both of these characters. You can go with a Shadow Monk. You can go so many directions with the Hexblade, and it's going to be really exciting. You could even jump into a Paladin if you wanted, and I think it's a really good option. Let's talk more about it. Let's go through this. So, oh man, I'm so excited to go through it. So expanded spell list, we get Shield, Wrathful Smite, Branding Smite, Blur, Blink, Elemental Weapon, Phantasmal Killer, Staggering Smite, which is not in Baldur's Gate 3, Banishing Smite, which would unlock Banishing Smite as the only other way to get Banishing Smite in the game, because the only other person that can get Banishing Smite is a Secrets Bard, I believe. And that's unfortunate. So now that unlocks Banishing Smite as a whole new option for this character, right? Because Banishing Smite, the typical way to access it is a Bardadin, right? It's a level 10 magical secret for the Lord Bard. So actually not even Lord Bard, just a level 10 magical secret. You don't have to go Lord Bard, sorry. People go with a Sword Bard. And then Cone of Cold. So it's a really nice spell kit, and the way that the Warlock spell slots work is really fun and really cool too. So just a lot of really cool stuff right out the gate with just by looking at the kit. Now for Hexblade's Curse, the Hexblade's Curse is something that's been kind of jerry-rigged into some other stuff in the game. We'll talk about that here. So you gain the ability to place a baleful curse on someone. As a bonus action, choose one creature you can see within 30 feet. The target is cursed for 10 turns, probably 1 minute, whatever. The curse ends early if the target dies, you die, or you're incapacitated. Until the curse ends, you gain the following benefits. I don't think we'll get this last one. This last one in red is basically the same one that we get from the Fiend. If the cursed target dies, you regain hit points equal to your Warlock level plus your Charisma level. That is 100% what the Fiend's bonus of the Dark One's Blessing gives you. Whenever you reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, this gift from your patron grants you Charisma modifier plus Warlock level temp hit points. So, well, maybe it's not exactly. This is a full-on heal. The other one's a temp hit point. I forgot. Sorry. So there is a chance this does actually heal you. It'll be interesting to see if it does or does not. But the other things I think are pretty possible. You gain a bonus damage to rolls against a cursed target. The bonus equals your proficiency bonus, and you can critical hit on a roll of 19 or 20. You spice this in with like a what's it called, an Eldritch Knight with that not Doom Domain, Death Domain Cleric. You can have so many different ways to approach this, and I'm just really excited for the options that this presents itself. Now with Hex Warrior, as a Warlock, you only have access to a limited number of things, right? Well, Hex Warrior gives us access to medium armor, shields, and martial weapons as a Warlock, which is really cool. We don't have to worry about that. And also, out the gate at level 1, when you attack, you basically, you're going to choose a weapon, you're going to imbue that weapon, as long as it's not a two-handed weapon. You can use your Charisma modifier instead of Strength or Dexterity for the attack rolls. So you basically get a different Pact of the Blade feature added in for the Hexblade Warlock. So you don't even need to take the Pact of the Blade. You can go a different direction with your Warlock, which I think is pretty cool here, because now it opens up some different capabilities, right? Your Pact boon, as it were, is Pact of the Chain, which is fine familiar, Pact of the Blade, or Pact of the Tome. So this maybe opens us up to some different options here for our abilities, and even further, some different Eldritch invocations because you've gone with a different pact. If you later gain the Pact of the Blade feature, the benefit extends to every pact weapon you can conjure with that feature, no matter the weapon's type. So I don't really know if this would have any effect or benefit to Pact of the Blade, period, but you basically have a built-in Pact of the Blade for one-handed weapons. The Accursed Spectre is that one ability that we were talking about here with the patch notes where you slay an enemy and they become a specter for you. So starting at the 6th level, you can curse the soul of a person you slay, temporarily binding it to your service. When you slay a humanoid creature, they become a specter. It gains temp hit points equal to half your Warlock level, roll initiative, so on and so forth. It obeys your verbal commands, and it gains a special bonus to its attack rolls equal to your Charisma modifier. It doesn't say anything about replenishing health for you, so maybe this is what Larian is going to do in lieu of this capability. So this thing does the necrotic damage that will rip away a chunk of your enemy's soul to provide your Hexblade Warlock with healing. So maybe this is how you're going to get healing from it. So that's how the Accursed Spectre might differ from tabletop to Larian's interpretation. But Armor of Hexes here is cool. If the target cursed by your Hexblade curses hits you with an attack, you can use a reaction to roll a d6. On a 4 or higher, the attack misses you instead, which is pretty nice. And Master of Hexes, you can spread your Hexblade curse from a slain creature to the a creature that is within a certain range for you. And I could see for sure that coming in as a level 10 feature. Armor of Hexes doesn't feel, well, I'm trying to compare it here. I could see Accursed Spectre as being a level 6 capability because every single Warlock has something at level 6. And they have something big at level 10. And I think it's either going to be Armor of Hexes to outright get a miss, which I think probably, you know, if I'm being honest, that probably plays a little bit better into different multi-class options. The way the Hex works is you can't use this feature again until you finish a long or short rest. So the Hexblade curse being limited to forcing you to short rest to get it back online could make the Master of Hexes your level 10 ability to keep your Hexblade rolling. So I think it kind of depends on which way Larian feels most people are going to go. What's worth noting here is most people don't bring their Warlock up to level 10 unless they're going to do a lore, a Bard lock, a lore Bard lock, which is 10 Warlock, 2 Bard usually, or vice versa. So it'd be, I could see them probably going with a different route here, but we'll see how that kind of shakes out. But I think it's one of the two of these makes it in for the level 10 ability for Warlock. But Hexblade, I think, is just going to be probably the most played subclass of everything because it offers so much versatility to a whole wide range of characters in Baldur's Gate 3. Our last, but certainly not least, subclass to talk about is the Wizard's Bladesinging. And it seems like it's going to be really cool and really spice up the Wizard in a really fun direction. Here you can take a look at what that actually looks like from the game. This is from that patch notes, of course, but some fun stuff to kind of jump into. Here's the lore, the patch notes. What the hell? Patch note. The Bladesinging subclass merges swordplay with wizardry. Expect new spellcasting animations when casting spells with your weapon, a new Bladesong ability to grant you supernatural speed, agility, and focus, plus give you a bonus to any Constitution saving throw you make. There's a lot of cool stuff with Bladesinging, and I think it can kind of seem on the surface kind of boring, especially how that patch note makes it out to be, but there's a lot of fun stuff here. Pretty much everything from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is pretty damn cool. So, training in War and Song, you gain proficiency with light armor, and you can use proficiency with one type of one-handed melee weapon of your choice. Probably, I don't know, like rapier. I have no idea what I would do in Baldur's Gate 3. There's a lot of different options. But this all comes into Bladesong. So, you can only use Bladesong when you aren't wearing medium or heavy armor or using a shield, and it graces you with supernatural speed and agility and focus, just like it said. And what this does is, you get all of these benefits. You gain a bonus to your AC equal to your intelligence modifier. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You have advantage on dex saving checks for acrobatics. You gain a bonus to any Constitution saving throw you make to maintain your concentration on a spell. The bonus equals your intelligence modifier. That's sick. That's really damn good. That's really damn good. Because what this is saying is, you're probably going to have high Constitution as a wizard, because you want that Constitution modifier, but then you're going to get your intelligence modifier added into it. That's really awesome. So you have a lot of ways to maintain concentration on all of your abilities. And I don't know how long this is going to last. This is for 1 minute. So I don't know if that's 5 turns, 10 turns, what that translation's like for BG3. Those of you that are D&D fanatics, you can tell me. It's like, oh, 1 minute's probably been 5 turns or 3 turns like we've seen in other character classes, what have you. But the Bladesinging gets its own special extra attack, because extra attack is a level 6 capability for almost all rogue melee class characters, right? Where you get to attack twice for every major action you do or primary action you do. But this time you can use that extra attack to cast a cantrip. So you can attack with your weapon and then cast a cantrip, or attack with your weapon and then cast a cantrip. I said the same thing twice. So you can have a lot of fun with this to use this in different ways. So I really like how that works. Song of Defense here. Basically, at level 10, you can use your Bladesong. So when you take damage, you can use your reaction to expend 1 spell slot if you have Bladesong active, and reduce that damage to you by an amount equal to 5 times the spell slot's level. So if it use a level 1 spell slot, it would do 5 damage, but if I do a level 5 spell slot, it would do 25 damage reduction. That's a cool way to mitigate damage for a character that's supposed to kind of be like a melee hybrid here, right? Song of Victory, you can add your intelligence modifier to the damage of your melee weapon attacks while your Bladesong is active. Now, the question's always like, how much of this makes it into the game? How much of it doesn't, right? Like, especially since this is a level 14 capability. And if we take a look at something like, I'm just going to click any of the other classes, you get level 2, 6, and 10. I think with the Bladesong, We would definitely see Bladesong at 2, obviously. I think we would see extra attack at 6, because that's what is like every other one. But when it comes down to that level 10 thing, Song of Victory and Song of Defense, it's hard for me to say that I would see one over the other as like a sure shoot, like fit in. Song of Defense fits in with more of the other subclasses, because usually there's some sort of defensive benefit at level 10 for our wizard subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3. So it's hard for me to say. But I think, you know, Song of Victory is something that's really kind of needed to keep that damage scaling up, because you're using just simply a one-handed only weapon. And I think too, taking a look at this, having really a lot of fun with Eldritch Knight is going to be really cool for this class, because Eldritch Knight already is jumping into tons of capabilities with intelligence. You wouldn't even need to take this extra attack. You could put 2 levels into a Bladesinging wizard, and then 10 levels into an Eldritch Knight to get access to Eldritch Strike. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, it has disadvantage on its next saving throw against a spell you cast before the end of your next turn. And War Magic, you have honed your body in magic. After you cast a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack using a bonus action. So a lot of cool stuff there. But even if you wanted to go 6 and 6 into Eldritch Knight and get this really cool Bladesinging extra attack, you could just have still so much fun, because you're combining the elements of an Eldritch Knight. Just remember, any multi-classing that you're going to see with this character, you could have done Hexblade, which we just talked about a little bit ago, but that's intelligence and it's charisma all over the place. You have to only be using light armor. I don't know if Larian is going to remove this, provided you aren't wearing medium or heavy armor or a shield. I don't know if they're going to keep it as a pure light armor class, whatever the situation is. But there's a lot of really fun ways that you can approach Bladesinging, and I think it's going to be another class that gets spiced into a ton of other ones, because Wizard is fun, but it's used typically to kind of abuse things, right? You put 1 level of Wizard in, then you can get the ability to turn all of your spell slots into scribable spell slots. Or, hey, I'm going to do Abjuration and Eldritch Knight to just go absolutely crazy with the shield capabilities to make a super strong tank. But I think Bladesinging is going to be a really fun way to add a lot of fun melee characteristics. Maybe even to a dude, like maybe a Bladesinging in, I don't know, a rogue could be really fun. I have no idea, but you can probably go a lot of really cool ways with this, especially since Wizard and Thief is a very common combination to add more bonus attacks, bonus actions to the character. So I'm very excited to see how Bladesinging is going to work out in Baldur's Gate 3. At that, it brings our video here to a close. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of what's coming with that new patch 8. Due out, I don't know, maybe in February. There's really like a lot of speculation on when that date is going to be for this patch. Is it going to be around Valentine's Day? Is it going to be around April 1st? Who knows? You know, there's so many big things happening this year for D&D 5th edition. So there's a good chance that Larian will probably do this alongside something from that. It could be the Monster Manual's launch. I think it's like I think it's like February 13th or 14th or something like that. Which coincidentally is Valentine's Day. So there's really no telling when this patch goes live. February is a pretty jammed up month for me personally. Like we've got Kingdom Come Deliverance at the very beginning of the month, and we've got Monster Hunter Wilds at the end of the month. So I'm hoping that it lands sometime in the middle of March, if I'm being selfish, so I can just give it all of its proper coverage and just do tons of really fun builds for these subclasses. Don't worry, we're going to be diving in hard on this. It's just going to add a whole nother vector of really fun subclass combinations. And go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. Are there specific subclass combinations, multi-class combinations that you're excited for, that you maybe have done in tabletop, or that you've just been doing a lot of homebrewing in, whatever the situation is? Let it be known below. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.